This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what an attack! What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Friday, the day before the start of the football weekend. Thursday football was last night. It was actually an interesting game, despite the fact that both those teams are probably going to end the season losing records. But hey, you know what? It was still a great game. For the moment, the Phillies are doing great. They're leading 6-0 in the sixth inning. It's a doubleheader, so it's only going 7 innings. So the odds of them not completely blowing this game is a little bit better right now than it was, let's say, last night. Josh Hennig, Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. We got a lot of football to get to. Of course, we get the football picks coming up a little bit later this hour. Also at 6:20, Eric Edholm. We'll chat with him about the NFL and college football. He covers both for Yahoo Sports. The PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open at 609-403-0973 to get on the conversation. Bills Eagles news to update you on over at 97.3 ESPN.com. A couple of news items up there for you guys. First of all, the Eagles injury report. 2 players are listed as questionable. 1 player is out. The one guy who's out is Alshon Jeffrey. That's not really no surprise at this point in time. He hasn't practiced at all. The 2 questionable players are Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett. Of course, Barnett, like Miles Sanders, has been dealing with a hamstring issue. Brandon Graham with a concussion, but both did practice, full participants at practice today. So even though they're listed as questionable, they were both full participants. So the hope is that they will play this week. Miles Sanders told the media today that he is playing this Sunday. He hopes they don't limit his snaps. He says he feels 100%. So it looks like Sanders, Barnett, and Lane Johnson will be back for this Sunday. Check out all the full injury report of the Eagles, as well as the story about how the Eagles are bringing in a 2-time Pro Bowl running back to work out. And catch all that information right now on 97.3 ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. With all that being said, I think it's becoming more and more visible that we're going to get a team that's healthy this Sunday. Javon Hargrave, spent a lot of money on him in the offseason. He's going to play. Miles Sanders, he was top 10 in the NFL last year in all-purpose yards. He's going to play. Lane Johnson, an all-pro right tackle. He's going to play. You heard Brian Baldinger say earlier on the Sports Bash this week that Lane Johnson rolls out of bed and he's an all-pro right tackle. So you're adding 3 very important, valuable players to your team this Sunday. So there should be confidence. There should be faith. There should be belief that this team will play better. Now, I can't guarantee exactly how much better they're going to play because some of that depends on the play calling. Some of that depends on how healthy they stay throughout the game. That depends on what Rams team shows up, to be honest with you, because I don't know if we're going to see the exact same Rams team we saw versus the Cowboys last week, partly because of the fact that I don't know if the Rams are going to want to run the ball that much if they start getting behind. Remember, they were either in the lead or tied for the majority of that game versus the Cowboys last week. You know that Sean McVay, he loves to throw the ball. He's a pass-happy, pretty kind of guy. We've seen him numerous times with Jared Goff throwing the ball over the yard. And it was Jamon Brown who spoke to the media this week that told the Eagles reporters that Sean McVay's offense gives an appearance of complexity when it's really not. So between that and what we saw on Sunday night, along with what we saw during Hard Knocks this year, it's very obvious that McVay runs the ball because he feels he needs to, not because he per se wants to. And that could be something the Eagles could have play into their favor because despite the fact that the Eagles don't have the biggest linebackers in the world, an Eagles defensive line that would have Hargrave, Jackson, and Fletcher Cox back, all three of them rotating in and out, even without Vinny Curry, they can stand up against the first brunt, the first punch of a running attack pretty well. I think that the Rams, they didn't give Robert Woods, who just signed a contract extension today, and Cooper Kupp all that money to just block all the time. They are good blockers, don't get me wrong. Van Jefferson, you didn't draft him just for appearances. No, you drafted these guys because you want to throw them the ball. So I think that there's a part of McVay that wants to come out here and throw it a little bit, and that could come into the Eagles' wheelhouse, because I think the Eagles, they are going up against a team that can be beat. When you look at the Rams, you realize that part of the reason why the Cowboys had troubles last week at times was because of the quick passing game of Jared Goff. The Cowboys were bringing 4, 5, 6 guys at times on blitzes, but Goff was getting the ball out of his hands between 1.8 and 2.5 seconds. They were showing that on the Sunday Night Football clocks. They were showing him with all the passes how quickly he was getting the ball out. If the Eagles, who have better corners than the Cowboys, can slow up those Ram receivers even by a second, it's going to force Goff to slow up even a little bit. And they showed the stat on Sunday Night Football. In Jared Goff's career, he is a remarkably different quarterback in terms of completion percentage, in terms of yards per attempt, in terms of turnovers, when he is throwing the ball in under 2.5 seconds. But when you get over the 2.5 second number, that's when he struggles. If I can figure that out, I'm sure the Eagles coaching staff understands that as well. And I think that the Eagles are going to go into this game defensively and realize that this Rams offense is beatable. They scored, 20 points last week? That's not exactly a high-powered offense. The Packers scored over 40 points last week. If Aaron Rodgers was coming in this Sunday, I'd be way more concerned. Heck, if Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers were coming to town tomorrow, I'd be more concerned than I am about the Rams right now. I think this is a great opportunity for the Eagles defense to get their feet under them, for this team to put themselves in a position to get a win and to go out there and have a good day at the office. Because I don't think the Rams are a team that is unbeatable. And I also believe that the Eagles, sometimes, it shows every year, they need to lose a game here and there to figure things out. Again, 2017, it was the Chiefs. 2018, it was the Saints. 2019, it was the Dolphins. All of these seasons, they had this loss that really feels like a punch to the gut. And you're just on the ground after a liver shot, like a beaten-up fighter, and they start making the count go on you, and you got to get back to your feet. That's what the Eagles are doing. They're getting back to their feet. They're getting back to it. And I think the Eagles have a great opportunity to get back on the winning track. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. Still to come, about 10 minutes from now, Eric Edholm, Yahoo Sports, will join us to talk more NFL and college football. Speaking of the NFL, last night, I was thoroughly entertained by that Browns-Bengals game. And for two teams that I believe will not have winning records by the end of this year, I thought it was a good game. It was a fun game to watch. And by the way, they did pretty good in the viewership numbers. And I'm glad that these stats came out a little bit earlier before I jumped on today. Because when we're talking about people who are watching sports, just like 4 years ago, you're going head-to-head with an election. So some of these numbers are going to be a little bit skewed. But the Bengals-Browns did average 6.68 million viewers. That is up 1% from, at this point, last year. It's interesting to note that the NBA also had 3.48 million. Remember, there's usually no NBA this time of year. The Lightning Islanders game, which went to overtime, by the way, got an average of 1.18 million. And if you remember, if you think about all the people who are watching those games and assume that maybe some of those people would be watching Thursday Night Football if there was no Heat Celtics game 2, which started at 7 o'clock, or Lightning Islanders game 6, which went into overtime. If you break it down, if you had half of those audiences, the Lightning and the Celtics Heat game, you add that to the total for Bengals Browns, you're probably closer to maybe 8 or 9 million people watching. So you're really not just up 1% from last year, but down 5% from 2018. You probably have more viewers than Ravens Bengals back in 2018. So again, it gets back to a conversation I had with all of you last Friday and over the weekend. Don't be manipulated by these people who are trying to tell you that the ratings are down and people aren't watching and all that garbage. Because it really is garbage. People are watching. And in fact, in some ways, maybe more people are watching than before. Because sports is awesome. It's a way to escape. It's a way for all of us to remove our minds and emotions from the dreck that we see in the news and on Twitter and all over social media every day. It's a beautiful thing. I'm watching the Phillies beat the snot out of the Blue Jays in these uniforms I really don't like, honestly, for the Blue Jays. I mean, these uniforms look more like spring training uniforms or maybe pajamas than actual Blue Jays uniforms. I mean, the bright blue on the bright blue with the dark blue stripe on the side. I mean, what is going on here? But it's okay because the Phillies are beating up on them. They got 2 men on base with 2 outs right now. Maybe they'll score more runs. Maybe the Phillies will get a win for once, and maybe Bros won't lose his mind tonight. Maybe it'll just be 1-2 the Phillies lose in this doubleheader instead of 2-2. Because the more runs the Phillies score right now, we know that the less runs they can potentially give up later in the game. And by the way, tonight, NBA playoffs. Speaking of the NBA playoffs last night, I'm still shocked that the Heat beat the Celtics last night. I'm talking about a team that doesn't know what to do in the moment. I thought the Celtics were supposed to be a well-coached team. Well, Brad Stevens wasn't doing a good job coaching last night because his team didn't know what to do when the Heat threw the zone at them. They looked confused. Tonight, Lakers, Nuggets, Game 1, right here on 97.3 ESPN at 8:30 starts the coverage. Tomorrow night, we have Heat Celtics Game 3 right here on 97.3 ESPN. So we got your NBA playoffs covered as well. And for the NBA playoffs, I just got to tell you, I thought the Celtics were going to win this series. To see the way the Heat have manhandled the Celtics at moments and stretches of this series has been incredible. This may be the most unique and best coaching job that Eric Spoelstra has ever done. I mean, they talk about Heat culture down there in Miami. Man, Pat Riley's got a bunch of scrappy fighters on that court. I mean, you bring in guys like Jay Crowder. You have guys out there like Duncan Robinson, who's a guy who was overlooked, and Bam Adebayo, who's a potential triple-double machine every single night. They're just so... They have a feel of like a throwback basketball team a little bit. But they still play a modern style because they shoot threes with guys like Robinson and Hero. And Goran Dragic, I mean, that guy decided to be a closer last night. I mean, what the heck happened? I feel like he went back in the time machine and got about 5 years younger last night. And the Celtics, I don't know how much of that is the coach, but I know it's pretty easy to blame the coach. What I do know is that from my 2 eyes, you know what I saw last night? I saw a basketball team that didn't know what to do when the Heat came on in the oven. When the Miami Heat made an adjustment, the Boston Celtics didn't know what to do. Now, the reports are that there was a shouting match after the game, and Marcus Smart was really angry after the game, and Brad Stevens had a meeting with his best players to talk about what can they do moving forward. We'll see what happens in Game 3. I'm not 100% confident that Game 3 is going to be a lot different, but I'm not going to dismiss the Celtics all out because I didn't pick them to win this series for no good reason. I thought they were going to win the series because I thought they had more talent, and I thought they had more go-to scoring. I thought they had more guys who could get the job done. And so far in the series, we've seen inconsistent play from Tatum, Brown, and Walker. At some point, those guys got to maybe do a little bit better. Game night here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. To get on the conversation, theplaysugarhouse.com text board, 609-403-0973. Coming up next, we'll get back in the NFL and college football with Eric Edholm of Yahoo Sports right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
With your text a little bit later this hour, of course, 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. But joining me right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline, as promised, Eric Edholm. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Check out his work with Yahoo Sports, covers the NFL and college football. And he joins us now, as said, on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Eric, how you doing this Friday?
I'm doing all right. What's going on, man?
Not too much. Just glad we got some football to talk about. And, you know, before we get into too many other things, I want to get your initial impressions because we have a couple weeks of the college football season under our belt, a week and change of the NFL under our belt. What are your impressions of the games in this 2020 environment? You know, most places in the NFL don't have fans so far. A couple of the college places have limited fans. And it seems like some teams it might be affecting, other teams not so much.
Yeah, I mean, just big picture, obviously it's a little bit of the Wild West with college football. I mean, you know, the different start times and games canceled and, you know, different levels of testing and resources to help kind of combat things and isolate infected players and things like that. So I think we all knew that the college season was going to be weird, you know, unexpected, you know, curveballs around every corner. NFL, a little bit more organized, a little bit more uniform, level playing field, so to speak. And yeah, I mean, last night I was watching the game at home, Browns Bengals, and you could hear the fans. I mean, there was only 6,000 in the stands. They were treated to a Browns victory. Always good for the local folks there who don't always get very many of those. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to really know whether home field advantage is being affected all that much, whether we're truly seeing. I mean, we'll see. You know, like this weekend, 12th man in Seattle, you know, New England goes up there. Can they steal a win? And does the lack of a crowd have anything to do with it, right? Those sorts of things. So, but the low infection rates of the NFL players, the rigid testing system has obviously worked to a certain degree so far.
Now, you mentioned them going up to Seattle. I got to know what your impressions are of this Patriots team because, you know, a lot of people, myself included, were wondering what exactly does a Patriots team look like with Cam Newton. But I also know that Bill Belichick is a guy who doesn't show us the same thing from week 1 to week 2. So week 1 may have been Cam Newton running the ball for 2 touchdowns. Who knows? Maybe Sunday night throws the ball 50 times.
Yeah, and you can say the same about the Seahawks, right? I mean, Russell Wilson goes out and has a brilliant day throwing the football. Wouldn't it be very Seahawkian if they were to take the ball out of his hands and give Chris Carson 34 carries or something? But you're right. I mean, I think Bill's really enjoying this. He's basically gone in. Yes, they're a game plan team, no doubt about it. Some weeks they're run heavy. Some weeks they use some more zone concepts. And, you know, other weeks Tom Brady used to throw the football a ton or throw a lot shorter. They'd go rhythm or whatever. But, you know, this year it's totally different because we've only seen 60 minutes of Cam Newton with the Patriots and no preseason action. I on some level, I think Bill Belichick thought this could be a competitive advantage, even with all the players they lost to the opt-outs, you know, even with, you know, a defense that looks a little bit thin on that side of the ball, as good as they were a year ago. I still feel like this is a great little challenge for him and for Newton too, knowing that eventually he's going to let it rip and throw the football more, and probably not going to keep up a 15 carry per game pace. But that's the excitement of the game, is just seeing what they'll do with them next.
And speaking of next, you got to wonder also around the NFL. I saw the report come out the other day with, all these contracts. Guys getting re-signed today. Robert Woods re-signing contracts. Football seems to be in a pretty healthy place, despite the fact of, we're all in 2020. So, for everything that's going on this year, it's at least good to know that the sport, the game itself, is at least in a healthy place. If we're seeing all these players dished out all this money, like Robert Woods, $65 million today.
Right. Yeah, and he's one of those players who I think has been pretty darn underrated for a while. Excellent route running and hands and great yards after the catch ability. That's really where he's most dangerous. And we saw it in that opening game. I think they went to him on about 3 of the first 7 plays of the game, and he really, made hay for them. So, it's just a snapshot of the player he is. But you're right, big picture. Obviously, the running back deals we've seen, the other extensions that have happened, we weren't really sure because the summer was a little bit of a slog financially speaking. I think people are kind of feeling out how are future cap hits going to be with, revenues down? Is this going to be spread out over multiple years? How do we handle these sorts of things? So, the old joke about the salary cap not being real and there's always money in the banana stand and all that, it's sort of a Twitter standard by this point. But, I think one of the hidden assets of smart teams is having somebody who can handle the books in such a way where you're not having to make those tough cuts every single year. You're not having to restructure, 18 contracts every year. So those are the teams that end up having a little hidden advantage when they're balancing their spreadsheets and being able to afford these kind of deals.
You mentioned having a guy who could have that creativity. I know here in Philadelphia, a guy who gets criticized by some people a lot, but does have that creativity is Howie Roseman. And I know
Sure.
the Eagles are in a very interesting situation because, the whole Zach Ertz contract situation. We know that, Carson Wentz's contract, that's going to start hitting the books in the next couple of years, really pushing the limits of the quote-unquote salary cap. We are now in 2020. We're now a couple of years removed from the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. So what is your perspective on Howie Roseman, Doug Peterson, and the Eagles organization now a couple of years removed from winning that ring?
Yeah, obviously still a ton of respect for both those guys and their ability to work together to figure out, the best way to construct a roster. And they lose Joe Douglas, obviously one of the better, scouting minds in the game. He goes to the Jets and takes that job. So that was clearly a hit. But I think they were smart to lock up some of the other guys in that scouting department as well. And, obviously with Andre Dillard not yet showing what his talent at this level, the Jalen Hurts pick got people all lathered up and, not really having an option when Miles Sanders is out of the game. There's always going to be those nitpicky things. The offensive line is clearly the hot button issue along with Ertz's contract, I would say. But this is life in the NFL, right? You're a hero 1 minute, you're the GOAT the next. And people are always going to be critical of the now, right? You can only live on your laurels for so long. It usually lasts about a summer when you win a title. So it's obviously the long-term pursuit of greatness that they're looking for. And I do think they're creative in a lot of ways, and I think they're innovative in other ways as well. So I understand the criticism or the questioning of some of their moves and whether the bloom is off the rose, so to speak. But they're near the top of their field for a reason. I think it's justified.
What is your impression of Carson Wentz at this point in year 5? I think a lot of people are frustrated with him after Sunday's game. We saw a very good Carson Wentz in the first half, a very, what I characterize, a stubborn one in the second half. So, where is Carson Wentz in year 5 now? Is this what he is? Is there still more room to grow here for him?
Yeah, that's an interesting choice of words there, stubborn, because, obviously he's got the ability, and I think he sort of has enough of that killer instinct to know, okay, I have the ability to cut a team's throat, and I can do that with my arm, my legs, my creativity. But at times he's got to play more within the game and more within himself and not try to force those balls like he did last week. And you're right. It really was a tale of two halves. And it's hard to say. I mean, this could end up being the worst game of his season. I mean, he may go on to, shades of 2017 before the injury, for all we know down the stretch here. But doing so without great protection, doing so with some, pieces in and out of the lineup. I think Jalen Reagor's still, he had the one big catch last week. I want to see what he can do with a full diet of targets and things like that. But Wentz, I mean, the questions are there for a reason. I mean, he takes some hits. He makes some questionable decisions. Skill set is there. And I think there's times when he puts a little bit too much pressure on himself, to chase that Super Bowl that he was a part of, but wasn't in the driver's seat when they crossed the finish line. And that's a tricky thing for a quarterback. Not too many guys have been quite in that same spot as he has. And you wonder how much of that hangs over him, big picture. So he's clearly got to dial it back some and understand when it's time to go for it, when it's time to take the smaller profits.
Eric Edholm joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. Yahoo Sports covers the NFL as well as college football. And Eric, speaking of college football, I'd love to get a couple of perspectives from you about the college football season so far, because we have a larger sample size of that than we do so far of the NFL. When I'm looking around college football, I think one of the biggest storylines came out last week was, not once, not twice, but 3 times, the Big 12 got punched in the face and got punched hard. Is that, are we overreacting when we say that maybe the Big 12 is not as strong as maybe people thought they would be this year?
Right. I mean, you have Oklahoma, you have Texas, both of them had blowout wins. You have this Saturday, Oklahoma State going into action. They're going to be one of the, 10 or 15 best, certainly one of the 10 or 15 best offenses in college football. But, when you're expecting teams like Iowa State, even against a good Louisiana team, to show up and not get run through the way they did, that's where you start separating the conferences a little bit and saying, are they that much ahead of the Pac-12? I mean, are they that, how do they rank now that the Big Ten is getting back into action here? I certainly wouldn't say top to bottom they're anywhere close. So, yeah, I mean, those teams on the bottom and in the middle class really failed to show up last week. Kansas was an embarrassing home loss. So, it obviously, some of the timing of this offseason and execution stuff can be excused early in the year, but after a certain point, everybody's sort of dealing with the same stuff.
Well, also, it's like what Dabo Swinney said earlier this week that, nobody's really guaranteed any number of games this year. So you could almost say that every game is even more important in 2020 than it's been in the past, especially considering that the College Football Playoff Committee pushed back as far as they could their decision to basically the week before Christmas.
Yeah, I mean, the whole system is getting sent through the blender a little bit, and nobody's playing a quote-unquote full season, and everybody is dealing with all these factors going on, some more than others. Let's be fair. It's not, obviously the SEC with the later start, can kind of measure things a little bit better, and I think they might be in a better spot than they've ever been, and that's saying something because the SEC has clearly been the power of college football for a decade or more. So, yeah, I mean, I think Dabo makes a pretty good point too, which is fewer games, not having that home field crowd advantage, even if you're at, 25 or 20% capacity, it's probably still not the same effect. I think that effect is bigger in college football than it is in the NFL. I was talking to Jeff Schwartz, about this the other day, and he said, absolutely. He's like, you see some of those crazy upsets that happen in college football. He said, I think it's because there's 85,000 crazed college fans, in the stands. A little different environment in the NFL, even if it gets loud. So, yeah, I definitely think this is going to be one of the weirder seasons by any kind of comparison.
One of the guys we did see play last week is a lot of the big names haven't played yet, or they've played limited amount of play. But what is your impression of Sam Howell over at North Carolina? I mean, this guy is very intriguing to me.
He is. I wouldn't say he played a great game on Saturday, but, you can see why some people mention him as a possible number 1 overall pick in 2022. We got to wait a little bit, right? Justin Herbert is a good example of a guy who played really well as a freshman, fascinated the heck out of all of us. And we said, wow, that guy just looks like a future number 1 overall pick. And he went 6th. I'm not trying to say the guy's a dog or anything like that, but he was the 3rd quarterback taken. And he was 3rd on some teams, by some teams' measures, by quite a bit. So I think the more we see a guy, the more warts we tend to find. You kind of find, tune and pick through their games a little bit. Like Wentz, I think he was trying to force the ball a little bit. That pick to Andre Sisco was almost an ego interception where he's like, I can make this throw. And you see him, clearly there are times when you got to reel it in a little bit. But I do love the fact that he has a great natural feel for the game, and he's not afraid to take those shots. And, there's something to be said for that. So I absolutely am intrigued by Sam.
Another quarterback I want to give you a perspective on before I let you go. With the Big Ten coming back now, how important is it for Justin Fields' draft stock to get some good games in here? Because we know that Trevor Lawrence is going to have, we hope to be, a full slate of a schedule this year. Fields, he's coming back in October. What could those 8 games mean for him?
Yeah, they can be pretty big. I mean, there's always the risk of coming back and playing poorly, especially with everything going haywire this year. But you've got Chris Olave at wide receiver. You've got depth at that spot. You've got a couple of tight ends that they like. The offensive line is a really good group, especially with Wyatt Davis, who had opted out, now is planning to come back. And, we'll see what his status is. But, they're loaded. I mean, defense should be great as well. Warner and Browning and all those guys on that side of the ball. Sean Wade just said he would come back as well. But for Fields, the difference between not playing and playing, it may only end up being 5 or 6 spots in the draft. I mean, let's say he didn't play. I still have a feeling that he would go top 10, because it was like, it's just like staying on a good hand, right? Like, I'm not gonna mess with this. But he could jump from, let's say, number 7 or 8 all the way up to 2 or 3. You know what I'm saying? So that financially, that's a big difference. And, they could go to a team where he might be able to start from Jump Street next year. So I like the fact that he was so excited to play this year and so adamant about wanting to play. And one of the vocal leaders in that Big Ten group of players who spoke out. And, the competitive spirit is there. He's a guy who has, 3 career interceptions, a ton of running ability, a ton of arm talent. Hard not to be excited that he's going to take the field this year.
It's also leadership too, right? I mean, we see what Trevor Lawrence is doing. We see what Fields is doing. I mean, you're seeing, quality human being going on here as well, not just great quarterback physically on the field.
Right. When we split ties and get down to the nitty gritty on these guys, I mean, that stuff matters, right? I mean, I don't know how you quantify leadership, but you know it when you see it. You know what I mean? And so both of these guys, I mean, we're in an era of athlete empowerment, I think. But they are, even at the quarterback position, elevating themselves, to a higher level. They understand that, look, they're not going to be everybody's best buddy, but they've got to be everybody's advocate. They've got to be out there making sure that they're the ones on the front lines, taking some of the criticism, maybe also taking some of the praise when they win and do things well. And the off-the-field stuff, I think, is going to go a long way and weigh heavily for both of them.
He's Eric Edholm. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Eric_Edholm. All of your NFL and college football coverage, also the NFL draft. You can catch it all with him over at Yahoo Sports. As all guests, he appeared today on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Eric, always appreciate the time and the insights.
All right, man. Have a great weekend. See ya.
Josh Hennig, Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN, being brought to you by SHM Financial. Are you quickly approaching or are you currently in retirement? Don't get overwhelmed. Contact SHM Financial right now. Give them a call at 800-MONEY-SHM or visit them online at shmfinancial.com. PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open, 609-403-0973. Speaking of football, I will give you my football picks for the weekend. We had a very good Saturday through Monday last weekend. But because some of these games being postponed, moved around, and everything else, we got lines fluctuating all over the place because of smart money dropping heavy early in the week on these lines. Let's see what we can do this week. Picks coming up, as well as more talk about NFL, college football, and we'll look ahead a little bit more to the NBA playoffs tonight at 8:30 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Lakers, Nuggets, Game 1. This is Game Night. I'm Josh Hennig. And this is 97.3 ESPN.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
PlaySugarHouse.com. Text board is open at 609-403-0973 for you on the conversation. The Phillies just won 7-0. Zach Eflin, a complete game shutout. I mean, it's technically a complete game because they only played 7 innings, but I'm just sorry. This baseball season's kind of got me all disillusioned. I love the NBA. They're going to go on tonight. I love the hockey. I mean, Stars versus Lightning. I mean, that's one of those matchups when you were younger and you were playing video games that you wanted to see happen. But now that now that we're older and we understand what the real world is like, you're kind of like, wow, that's a little bit of a letdown. You really wanted Vegas versus Tampa or something like that, but the Stars just kind of came out of nowhere and are spoiling the party this year. So I'm all for the hockey. I'm all for the NBA. I'm all for the football. But, baseball just feels like they're trying to, the whole situation with how the season got started and, all the weeks off teams have had because of these COVID issues and everything that's going on this year has just kind of put a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. That's all. This weekend, of course, we got football, NBA, and more right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow night, we have Game 3 of the Heat and Celtics. Tonight, we have the Lakers and Nuggets. I like Hunter Brody's bet from earlier today. For those of you who are maybe looking to get involved in some action, this +7 for Denver looks very delicious right now because as Hunter brought up earlier on the Sports Bash, LeBron has a tendency to lay an egg in those first games. And if LeBron James lays an egg, we know that the Nuggets can definitely cover the 7. I'm not doing outright win. I don't know if they're going to outright win it, though, because I think the Nuggets might be a little bit tired. I mean, they've gone 7 games a couple times now. And then with 7 games, they went, the tough series this last series. I don't know how much steam they have left in them. So I'm not going to say, if you want to get involved and get some money involved, go throw out on the money line. But, the +7 is very rational to go along with, especially considering the fact that it opened at +6.5 and now it's +7. It tells you that at least you're not the only one thinking that there's something to be had there. That's for sure. I'll get you my prognostication for the Eagles season coming up in a few minutes. Just want to update you on a little bit of news from around the sport. For those who play fantasy football, there will be no George Kittle and no Kenny Galladay this Sunday in the NFL. So if you're looking for a tight end, you might want to try go out and see who's available on the waiver wire. I know that Dallas Goedert's available in a lot of leagues out there, depending on who you're playing with. I know that for Kenny Galladay being out, that affects some people's lives, but he was out last week as well. So maybe someone like Paris Campbell from the Colts, we talked about with him with Andy McNamara yesterday. If you missed yesterday's Game Night, you can go check it out on the Game Night podcast over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Game Night podcasts are dropped each evening after the show. There's a lot of different things to keep track of right now in the sports world. Looks like also Brandon Ayuk is going to make his debut for the 49ers. So no George Kittle, no Deebo Samuel, but the rookie Ayuk, they drafted him for a reason. Don't be surprised if he gets to go out there and has himself a game. Just saying. I would not be surprised, not at all, one bit. 609-403-0973 is text board, by the way, to get on the conversation. So each week I give you some of my ideas about the college football weekend. Not a lot of good pickings this weekend, to be honest with you. Not a lot of good options. So I'm not going to shy away from the challenge. All right? I've never been afraid, but I'm just letting you know that the pickings are a little slim, especially with the Houston-Baylor game getting yanked from the schedule. For those who didn't hear, so Houston and Baylor both lost their opponents for this weekend last week. And so what happened is they decided, well, we're near each other. Why don't we just play each other? Makes a lot of sense. Why not? So today, less than 24 hours for kickoff, it ended up that the game was being pulled. The original report was that the Houston team did not meet the COVID-19 restriction protocols. Because if you're going to play out a conference, you got to follow the conference that you're playing against's protocols. In this case, the Big 12, you're going to Baylor. You got to follow their protocols. Come to find out that the issue was less about the protocols for the team, but it may have had to do with a specific player or group of players who they got a little bit, shall I say, loose with the contact tracing. So they basically pulled the plug on one game because they couldn't get all the information about where certain players were at one point in time. And that there was one specific player that tested negative 5 times in 12 days, according to a report by someone who covers Houston and Baylor college football down there in Texas. They're claiming that because the player tested 5 times in 12 days, there might have been an overlap, a little bit of looseness, whatever. I'm over it. 2020 can just go away at this point. So we lost the Houston-Baylor game. It would have been a great game, but we got other games to get to. I am going Navy +8 over Tulane. I'm going to give Navy one more chance. Listen, the midshipmen have won 4 of the last 5 meetings since joining the ACC against Tulane. The average margin of victory of those games has been 6 points. And the last 3 meetings have been decided by a total of 6 points. And Navy claims they are back to hitting in practice. So I think Navy can make this a sluggish, ugly game. I'm going to give them one more chance to show me they can get things done. Huge game tomorrow night, Miami of Florida versus Louisville. I love this game so much. Eric King for Miami, Louisville wants to show they can score and they can play better than they did against Miami last year. Remember, the Hurricanes lost several players to either the graduation in the NFL or opting out due to the coronavirus. So that includes their leading rusher, that includes their leading receiver, their leading tackler, their top cornerback from last year. I am going over 64.5. I think it's going to be a shootout between Miami and Louisville. Louisville wants to prove they can play offense, and Miami's got a dynamic quarterback. Also on the college football front, I'm going to go over 49.5 for the Syracuse Pitt game. I know that Syracuse allowed more total yards in their game last week versus UNC than Pitt had last week. That's 463 to 456. I think Syracuse plays a little bit better this week offensively. I think Pitt has a high-powered offense. I'm going to go over 49.5. Also, with the Tulsa-Oklahoma State game, I am going over 66. The reason I'm going over is simply last season, Oklahoma State, this is a team that already played Tulsa. They beat Tulsa last year 40-21, and Tulsa arguably is a better team this year. They're bringing back a senior quarterback in Zach Smith, senior wide receiver in Kellen Stokes. They also have a senior running back in Shamon Brooks. They have a high-powered offense. I think we're going to see points tomorrow versus Oklahoma State and Tulsa. The over-under is 66. I understand it's a high number. It's a little bit risky, but I'm going to roll with it because why not? Why not? I'm 8-3 on the year. Why not? I'll be back on the air tomorrow, Sports Bash Saturday. I'll give you my NFL picks tomorrow when we jump on the air.